Well, hello from the Aviva Stadium. Well, what an utterly deflating night for Ireland tonight. Andy Farrell's team have been beaten by the All Blacks 23 points to 13. The loss also ends Ireland's 19-game home winning run. I'm Sinead Kissane, Ruaidhri O'Connor and Cian Tracey are here. Well, lads, what's your assessment of that?
It was very, very poor. It was as poor an Ireland performance as well. I suppose the first test in South Africa wasn't a particularly great performance. The Scotland performance here in the Six Nations wasn't a great performance. The England performance was probably better than that, but they lost that game as well. And I'm starting to get worried that there's a bit of a trend happening, that this team is maybe reaching the end of the road in terms of the team that was at the World Cup. You know, Andy Farrell described the Six Nations as a continuation of that journey, as they like to call it. Well, I wonder if we should have seen more renewal this year. That, you know, Scott Robertson took over the All Blacks, and he, you know, a lot of players moved to Japan, a lot of players retired, and he's had to renew his team, and there's been teething problems along the way. But at the end of 2024, they've been able to come to Dublin, beat Ireland by 10 points, and deliver probably their most complete performance. Whereas Ireland are kind of fudging it. You know, you still have veteran players. Yeah. Well, I think he's loyal to those players. I think he did make the point on Thursday or Wednesday when I asked him about it, that, you know, it takes players, that we don't have in Ireland the same pool of players as other nations have, that it's, you know, that he didn't want to throw players in, and which seems a bit weird when you're talking about, say, Ryan Baird and Craig Casey have won Grand Slams in Six Nations. I'm not saying Craig Casey and Ryan Baird would have won the game tonight, but when you see that team play as badly as it did, you know, make 21 handling errors, Keane's got all the stats to hand, you know, they've lost 3 of their last 5 games now. This was a big moment in their year. It was probably the game of the autumn in terms of the one if they were going to make a statement, this is the one to win. We expect them to win the other 3. I wouldn't guarantee it now after seeing what we saw tonight. Look, they've got credit in the bank. They will bounce back. It's just how they bounce back and how long is it going to take, having persisted this long. The 10's not playing well. There's a lot, I think, that will concern Ireland fans who paid a lot of money to be here tonight and never got a performance. Now, they haven't been shortchanged often, but that was a poor night for them.
Yeah, like, I wouldn't be pushing the panic button just yet. I think it was a bad night at the office. I would slightly disagree that was the All Blacks' most complete performance. I actually thought they were pretty poor and were there for the taking as well.
I think this year, I mean,
this year they had good wins over England as well. Even last week in Twickenham, they showed a lot more in attack, certainly, than they did tonight. Now, Ireland's defence was ironically actually good for large parts, but wow, the attack was alarmingly poor. And look, we've said it before that Andy Farrell is the one who oversees the attack, but in terms of Andrew Goodman coming in as the backs coach, that was not a positive first outing that you'd like to see at all. Look, it had all the hallmarks of what it was, a first hit out of the season for these players. But look, we've just spoken Andy Farrell, he's not going to use that as an excuse, nor should they. But the All Blacks just looked that little bit sharper, a little bit more cohesive. But even in the build-up, you know, Sinead, we were talking about it beforehand, that this is what Ireland sort of pride themselves on, is their cohesion, and it just went out the window. The handling errors were off the charts. I got some of the stats here to hand, which I think just sum up really damning. Yeah, so like 13 penalties conceded. This is all Ireland, obviously. 13 penalties conceded, 30 missed tackles, 21 handling errors, 11 turnovers conceded, 5 rucks lost, 3 lineouts lost, 1 scrum lost, and as I put in, 0 bench impact. Rhoda's just touched on it there. Look, Andy Farrell went with, you know, a tried and trusted players on the bench. Like, I could see the logic in what he was thinking, but I think he'll be the first to admit that it backfired. He got absolutely nothing off that bench. Once again, we have a scenario where Andrew Porter is playing 78 minutes and was playing really well, but, like, you know, you're asking a lot of Cian Healy, who's clearly at the very end of his career and not being trusted to come on and impact a game. You've guys like really experienced guys like Ian Henderson that came on, made a couple of poor mistakes. Conor Murray's only been brought on towards the end of the game, even though I thought Jamison Gibson-Park was probably Ireland's best player, so I could understand that. But they just got nothing off the bench. So really worrying all round. But you would hope that it's a bit of a blip and that they can bounce back. But as you've rightly said, right, this was the big game of the campaign. I think if they are to go on and beat Argentina next week, Fiji and Australia, there'll still be a sense of unfulfillment because they've let this slip. And I do think that All Blacks team were there for the taking. Yeah, would you go with the blip line, or how much can we read into the fact that New Zealand were more battle-hardened than Ireland coming into this game?
It's absolutely a factor. I don't think we can dismiss it by any means. You know, they played 2 games in a row. They played an entire rugby championship in the time since Ireland last played together in South Africa. we've had 6 provincial games this season. Leinster have been going very well. The other provinces haven't really. They've been hit or miss. Munster's been a bit of a disaster. So players, the two hookers had 12 minutes between them coming into the game. Ireland were missing Tadhg Furlong. There are excuses there. There are ready-made excuses and explanations for what we saw tonight. But the worry is that rather than a blip, that it's a continuation of that South Africa, the second test was a blip, that the first test, that the England performance, that the Scotland performance, that was a really worrying day when they fell over the line in the Six Nations. Yes, they got their hands on the trophy, but just that this team in the post-Johnny Sexton era, as they adapt to life without their talisman, is starting to look like it's in need of a lot of renewal. And that was my sense going to South Africa. And then the second test, the first half performance was brilliant, and then Kieran Frawley did what he did after they'd lost control of that game. But tonight, if you think about where these two teams got to 13 months ago, the level that they both hit, that was League Two stuff compared to that tonight. That was really, the levels have dropped off from both teams. But I think the point I was making earlier is I think that was a sign that the All Blacks are starting to put it together. It was an 80-minute performance for them in terms of control. They kept Ireland in the right areas. They were smarter. Now look, it's easier when Ireland are dropping the ball every five seconds. They didn't have to be brilliant tonight, the All Blacks, but what they were good at, I think, was they controlled the game far better than Ireland. They were smarter than Ireland. Mackenzie, he isn't necessarily a world-class 10, but he looked a more authoritative 10 out there tonight. They were dominant in so many areas, and Ireland's breakdown in their defence kind of kept them in it in the first half, but then Ireland get themselves in winning position and they squander it. So that's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's not a vintage All Blacks team, but we know how dangerous they are, and I suppose what I mean by they were there for the taking, you look at Ireland's record coming to this, and I think that was a real statement win in lots of ways. It wasn't a statement performance, but it was a statement win to end Ireland's 19 home winning run is remarkable. Ireland hadn't been beaten here since the 2021 Six Nations during COVID, a game that probably no one even remembers at this stage, but that's how far back you have to go. So while it wasn't the perfect performance by any means, it's massive for the All Blacks, who I do think are going to get it right under Scott Robertson. They're clearly going through a period of transition, and Rudd is right. They've brought in a new head coach after the World Cup, but Ireland are still, I think, trying to work their way through, and it's going to be a tricky period next year when Andy Farrell goes off to the Lions. So I would imagine that they would have had mapped out a plan at the start of the month in terms of, injuries permitting, what they're going to do and how they're going to play certain guys. It's something that I asked them about just afterwards there. For me, a part of you would want to see certain guys being given a chance next week to rectify it, but also it's clear that it needs to be freshened up. I would say guys, you've touched them, guys like Craig Casey and Ryan Baird, I'd say were absolutely gutted to have missed out tonight. Again, not to say that they would have changed the game, but in terms of trying to move the dial and move forward, if you're not going to play the younger guys in November internationals, when are you going to do it? Because once the Six Nations rolls around and Andy Farrell has gone off with the Lions, you're going to expect to see the strongest Ireland team rolled out. So over the next 3 weeks, I think it's now become an even more important period for Ireland in terms of trying to maybe but maybe just trying to freshen it up and get a bit of new blood in, because the guys that you mentioned, like Craig Casey, did really well in South Africa until he went injured. Ryan Baird as well. I know he hasn't shot the lights out this season, but they are the guys who are going to have to carry this forward. I know, not to look too far ahead, but to the next World Cup. So I think the next 3 weeks are going to be really important for that.
You mentioned Kieran Frawley there, what he did in South Africa. How did they go tonight? Jack Crowley taken off. Came off after, 58 minutes, Frawley on then?
Up until the knock-on, I wouldn't have been screaming for Crowley to come off. I don't think he controlled the game brilliantly. I don't think Ireland really gave him the platform to go and control the game. I thought he did some things very well. I thought he was playing quite far back from the line. I don't think he challenged the New Zealand line in the way that you might expected him to. I think his confidence has got to be hit by what's gone on in Munster. But at the same time, he kicked his goals, which is something that he hasn't always done. He turned that 5 into 7. And until he dropped that ball, I thought he was going okay. I wouldn't have been looking for him to come off. But I thought it was a brave call by Andy Farrell. And I thought he was sending on a player in Kieran Frawley who has a hot hand, who's been really good at the start of this season. His last act in a green jersey was a remarkable one, a historic one, a huge moment over in Durban. And his first touch looked pretty good. He got a nice offload away, and that offload was dropped, but that wasn't his fault. But after that, it just went from bad to worse. The drop balls. He played fullback for Ireland last year. He's dropping balls out of the sky that really he should be taking in his sleep. And I'd say he's absolutely raging, because if Andy Farrell's willing to take Jack Crowley off with 23 minutes to go, Well, then if Kieran Frawley comes on and controls the game against the All Blacks and wins it, then I think the jersey's his next week. Unfortunately, he had control of the jersey and liked the ball. He let it slip. I say the big winner tonight was Sam Prendergast, because he's the third out half in the squad, and like, what harm in putting them in? I think they'll all probably get a chance to go again next Friday. I don't, I'm being critical, and I still think there's a lot of good players in that dressing room. I think there's a great coach in charge of it. I think they will turn it around. I just think they need to start doing it now and start replenishing it. But I think Crowley should get another run next Friday to rectify it and to run the show again. I think the fact that they were undercooked is a factor. But it was an alarming performance in so many ways.
Yeah, like I turned to you when Jack Crowley got taken off, and like I agree with you. I didn't think he was playing overly poorly. I agree again that he didn't quite have control over the game. But to see your out half being taken off at such a key part of the game was such a big moment. And to be fair, you made the point that we've become so used to Johnny Sexton playing all the time. But and I know England took Marcus Smith off to their detriment, as it turned out, against the All Blacks. But generally, your main guy, your main playmaker stays on for those crucial moments. And when he did go off, there was no doubt that the door opened for Kieran Frawley, who Andy Farrell clearly has a lot of faith and trust in. He's invested a lot more than Leinster have in terms of seeing him as that 10, but he did not take his opportunity at all. I thought the nerves that he showed were just indicative of what we had seen probably up to that point as well, and from then on it just spread. And I touched on it already, like the lack of impact from the bench was pretty jarring, really, especially from a bench who was picked to, with all that experience. I suppose Kieran Frawley obviously aside, but plenty of experience, and that is going to seriously rankle with them, and I think they will have regrets about that, because I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it is how a 23-man game, and like having guys who are not, well, first of all, guys who are not trusted to come on for long enough, but then guys who are not delivering is just pretty poor. But I wouldn't put the blame on any one player in particular coming off that bench, because I thought the 15 guys, well, most of them anyway, Gibson Park, Andrew Porter maybe aside, were just nowhere near the level that we expect them to be, really. And that's the thing, they've set their own standard. So however critical we are of them, I would say that, like, if Sunday morning, you imagine they're probably going to be reviewing it, it will not make for pleasant viewing at all, because it's just not good enough at all, really.
What about Nick Berry, the scrum penalty that time against Beelum? I'm not sure if the Ireland management will be happy with that. They said they'll try and get some answers from Nick Berry. What do you make of it overall?
Beelum's just there, you could just ask him.
Yeah, I think he's gone, thankfully. But no, like that one looked like Ireland had momentum. They were going forward. I think you need to look back more forensically than I have to make a judgment call on whether he took the step and that was the reason they got momentum. But 9 times out of 10, Ireland got the ball away from that score. I think they knocked it on and then it went back for the penalty, didn't they? So I thought overall, look, Ireland were almost taking the Leinster, the Jack Nienaber approach of making shit out of the breakdown. Like they were tearing into them. They were trying to make Roygaard's Curtis Radamus. Sorry, I got my names mixed up. They were trying to make his life hell, and they succeeded. One of the things they did really well was get in his face and make him make mistakes. He made nearly as many errors as Ireland did, so that worked. But if you push the envelope at the breakdown repeatedly over and over again, you're going to get on the wrong side of a referee. And Nick Berry punished them, and they didn't adapt to the way he was refereeing it. And they seemed to be giving away compounding penalties, kind of making the same errors over and over again, and they were making them at bad times as well. Like it's a very high penalty count. It's unlike Ireland. The
relationship between Caelan Doris and Nick Berry became slightly strained as well in the second half, because look, Caelan Doris has admitted this himself, that this is all very new. I know he captained the Ireland under-20s and stuff, but in terms of being like a top level captain, it is all very new. And he's clearly trying to make an impression, on the squad, on the coaches, and he's getting messages obviously sent down onto the pitch as well. But at one stage in the second half, you could hear on the ref mic where Nick Berry just said, "I'm not going to talk to you at every single breakdown." So that is something that clearly he's going to have to try and work on. I did notice as well, I don't know if the TV cameras picked it up, but as they were walking off for half time, Caelan Doris was in his ear as well, and unfortunately they just switched off the ref mic, so we couldn't quite hear what was being said. So I think that's part of the learning curve as well, trying to get that balance right. I think for the most part he did do a good job, but I agree with you, I thought they were trying to make the breakdown an absolute mess, and they did disrupt him, to be fair, a lot of the times. But the problem was, like you said, like Ty Burns stripped the ball brilliantly in the first half, but then when they would do something good, they would just come up with whether it was Bundyaki knocking on or giving away a stupid penalty, just stuff that you never expect to see from this team. So so much to work on, because like, we're probably touching it, but like this Argentina side who are coming next week, I don't think are going to be the Argentina side where Ireland have put big scores on them in the past. So they have to seriously turn the page really quickly to get it right for them, I think.
And we mentioned as well the Ireland attack. Obviously, Josh van der Fleer scored that try minutes into the second half, and New Zealand were down to 14 players after Jordy Barrett got that yellow card for the high tackle on Gary Ringrose. Just more on that, like how disappointing that was and what we didn't see from them.
Well, it's the trademark. It's the hallmark of this team, is their ability to play this intricate short passing attack, going, keeping their shape through multiple phases, having these multiple options that pull defences apart. We really didn't see it. Like the try came from Caelan Doris picking off the back of a scrum, one out carry. No, they're good carries, accurate carries, good passing for Gibson Park, and there's no bad way to score. But the stuff that they've relied on really didn't work for them. The stuff that we've come to, the things that, Cian, you were down in New Zealand, like the attack in the 2022 series with Sexton pulling the strings was magnificent. And, even last season there were, over in Marseille, that attack, that shape held up. Well, tonight it broke down. It was a difficult night, but it rained in Portugal for 2 days when they were training over there, so they should have been used to that. They didn't. They've another trademark of this team is that they come into windows and they hit the ground running with really big performances. Marseille, Cardiff in the Six Nations the previous year. The series, they generally turn up and play well. And this was just, it was off colour. It didn't look like they were, all that cohesion, just didn't look like it was all coming together for them at all. I loved Andy Farrell. I just thought he was a little bit tetchy on Wednesday at the team announcement. I thought there was a little bit of a sense of a bit of a mood, and I wonder whether training just hadn't gone as well as it ordinarily has. But it was well off their usual levels. The handling, like, you just have to come back to that one stat, like dropping the ball 21 times, crazy.
Yeah, I think the set pieces worth touching on as well, Sinead. I thought by and large the scrum did really well. We'll obviously have to have a look back at that penalty, but certainly at the time watching it live, it seemed contentious. I actually said to you, it's an Ireland penalty at the time, so we'll have to watch it back. But the line-out was an issue. The scrum was good, but the line-out was an issue. And the maul. Like, I'm not sure what has happened to the Ireland maul, but I can think of two occasions, once in the first half, once in the second. Actually, just before they scored Josh van der Fleer's try. Their maul is just being stopped dead at source. Now, you have to give...
Keller tries to throw it out the top and they lose it.
And I think you have to give the All Blacks a lot of credit for that. But for an Irish team, an Irish forward pack that's being coached by Paul O'Connell, who pride themselves on their finer detail around the maul, it hasn't been good for a while. And I thought once again tonight they didn't come up with the answers, because if you have a 5 metre line out, I mean, that is like your bread and butter. And so many of Ireland's tries come off line outs, whether it's maul or using it as an attacking platform. But it was just so scrappy. And again, I know Ronan Keller hasn't played a lot of rugby this season, and he did empty himself for the hour that he was on. But there's something with the Irish line out that's just still not working.
Teams are giving them the front and they're stacking the middle and the back lifting channels, and they're taking the front a lot of the time. But because they're going from the front, they're going to the front, they're not really giving themselves a chance to maul.
Place to attack
it's
from,
a crap place to attack from. And then they went to the middle a couple of times and Scott Barrett picked them off. One time in the second half, they went for it and they threw to the tail. I can't remember who took the line out, but the attack broke down. It was the first time they looked super dangerous off a set piece attack. They got to be able to nail those.
Does that just show a lack of confidence in the line-out, though, if they are doing that?
Well, I think it's partly, because everyone knows they scored. I think 16 of their last 22 tries came off the line-out, and that's another one. Tonight's one came off a scrum, so that'll one up in that. But teams know that they score off line-out. That Andrew Goodman's good at launching plays. That's his MO. That this is where they get their oxygen from. New Zealand score counter-attacks. Their try scoring comes from all different departments. So teams are going to contest against them, and South Africa and New Zealand are two of the best defensive lineouts in the game. So if it's partly adapting to the opposition, but Ireland just haven't been able to rise above what other teams are able to do. We saw it at the World Cup, operating at 80% and those sorts of numbers, and they bristle when they're asked about it. But at this stage, you got to be wondering what they're doing and how they're going to improve it. Is there no one there who just loves the line out enough to just elevate their standards?
Well, Paul O'Connell does. Ironically, you know what I mean? And like I said, it has been an issue. And you look at the makeup of the pack tonight, when you had Tyg Byrne, who plays at lock most of the time for Munster, playing at 6. He's the one who calls the line out, along with Peter O'Mahony in Munster. You've James Ryan, who's a line out caller. So you've a lot of guys there who are, line out is, or should be, their bread and butter. But like, it's a problem that's been like ongoing for a while. Look, and it was just one of many issues tonight. But I just thought those two incidents that I'm talking about, the one in the first half and the build up to the try, where they just got absolutely no change out of the maul. Now, I do think that is a beefy All Blacks back, and like I said,
Jason Ryan, their forwards coach, is a maul
really
specialist,
good, so
and their maul defence was really good. That's one of the things they did well tonight.
And I think they deserve credit, obviously, but yeah, it's just you're not used to seeing that. Well, you are, I suppose, as the case maybe in this instance with this Ireland team, but they have to rectify that, because look, they got lucky in a way with how the try came about in terms of the ball spilling loose, and Bundy Aki and James Lowe made an absolutely brilliant double hit on Sam Kane over the line, and that's where they scored a try from. But if that hadn't happened and New Zealand had gathered a ball, then that's another butchered, really good opportunity.
They had it, like, Jody Barrett was off the pitch and they got back. It was a kick chase. It's a little bit scrambled in my head, the detail of it, but they got back into the New Zealand 22. They got them on the run. They big turnover. I think Aki knocked it on, if I'm not mistaken. Someone knocked the ball on, but they just were their own worst enemies in terms of errors. At that point, when Jody Barrett was off the pitch, if they'd gone 2 scores ahead, this Ireland team win the game. They close it out. No matter who's playing 10, no matter how bad their confidence level or things are not working, they get over the line because they're good enough to do it. They're good enough to produce that. But they just kept, whether it was a penalty that let New Zealand get field position, or whether it was a knock on that just sapped the life out of them, and you could feel the energy in the stadium. I mean, it was Scott Barrett actually said it there. He was like, he was pretty happy to hear a silent stadium at the end, because the atmosphere at the start was brilliant.
This might sound overly critical, but even the way they scored the try, New Zealand were down a back. And look, they scored a try and it worked out really well. But to me, the percentage play there is to go out the back and use your back line and exploit the space. Because we were saying that what they'd done was they all actually have to shift inside, and the amount of space that was on the outside. So, look, again, they scored a try, so I'm trying not to be overly critical, but to me it just spoke to a team who maybe weren't fully confident in their attack, and it was a little bit surprising because if that's the All Blacks down the other end, they have a move where Will Jordan is trying to win the outside.
They did it twice. This is where I was critical of it. They mauled the line out when they had an extra back, and then they got the fortuitous scrum, and Doris picks, which means New Zealand have 14 men on their feet. But when they've got 8 packed down, you've got a man advantage, and you're one of the best attacks in the world. And it just didn't seem to trust it. Didn't seem to have confidence. Whether, I don't know, did Doris just feel that it was going to burst out, and he went for it. It was a great carry, and it worked. Yeah. But just that bit of game management, that bit of smarts. It's a new captain. It's a reasonably new 10. Maybe they are still learning. Maybe this is what it was always going to be like once Sexton retired. And we're just getting to that point now where it's going to get a bit tricky.
Felt his absence.
The unfortunate thing is the head coach won't be there for the next couple of months after the end of this window. So maybe things are going to get a bit tricky for a while. But there's enough good players and enough good coaches in there to fix all of this. Yeah. But I think they need to start fixing it quick. Okay.
Anything else in the game before we quickly go on to Argentina? What can...
I enjoyed the haka, Ireland meeting the haka, Willie Anderson-esque, Peter O'Mahony.
Not pumped at all.
You just couldn't help but smile at him, and obviously Ireland
broke the bench when he sat down.
They took a step forward, with which is kind of par for the course nowadays. But then, I'm not sure who Peter O'Mahony had. Was it Jamie Osborne? Maybe
Osborne.
He almost had him in a headlock around the head, marching him forward. But look, I thought Gary Ringrose's hit on Rico Ioane was an unbelievable, technique wise as well, and obviously
Jameson Gibson Park
came up with two brilliant cover tackles. But again, you don't want your scrum half to be having to make these brilliant last-ditch cover tackles. Obviously, Ringrose was on the end of like you mentioned, Sinead, a high shot from his soon-to-be Leinster centre partner. So, look, Ireland, they met the hack and all that, and it was enjoyable. But ultimately, the All Blacks had the last laugh, just as they did when it mattered most last year in Paris, unfortunately.
It's 5-5 since 2016 now. I think we do need to give the All Blacks credit for the way they turned up tonight. They were the better team. They looked they looked a more mature team, even though Ireland had all the old heads on the bench. They
Biggest
made
win
better
under
decisions.
Scott Robertson.
Yeah,
so
a big
far.
moment.
Sure,
A big moment in their year.
To end Ireland's run, like I said, like that's a big
it's
moment for them.
Absolutely, and they were probably undeserving winners in Twickenham last week because of England missed those kicks at the end. But tonight they were the better team and they deserved their win. So they, if anyone from New Zealand is still listening after we talked about Ireland for the last 20 odd minutes, I think they're not. I think they'll get better.
They'll get better under Scott Robson. They have a really good coaching staff in there. Like you mentioned, Jason Ryan, Jason Holland there as well. Like the All Blacks. Look, not that they ever did
Will
go away,
Jordan
but
always scores against Ireland.
Always scores.
37 tries.
Was that his fifth try against Ireland?
37 tries in 39 games is just ludicrous, really, isn't it? So that's the kind of quality you're up against.
Before we go, what player is particularly worried tonight about his keeping his starting place for next week?
I think Jack Riley probably was worried when he was coming off, but then when he saw what Kieran Frawley produced, he's probably happy enough tonight. He'll be back in next week. I don't see him making wholesale changes. Only Gaki was great. Only a couple of good moments. He's got a lot of credit in the bank, but Robbie Henshaw is there.
He dropped him in South Africa.
Henshaw's there. Osborne's there. Didn't think Matt Hansen had a brilliant game, but again, he's playing his way into the season. I think there's scope to change up the back five of the scrum. It's Tyburn was really good in that position against South Africa in the summer, but he's had a bad start to the season. The Munster players don't look confident, and it's understandable. He's had a lot on his plate. I wonder if this is a game for. Is it too soon for Izuchukwu? Is it time to give Ryan Baird a start in 6 and see how he goes? Do you go with a more kind of dynamic Nick Timoney or someone in your back row to try and freshen things up? I think the team does need to be freshened up to some degree, but I don't think he's going to start. He's not going to panic. He'll probably make 2 or 3 changes to freshen things up, but he'll also think that team was undercooked going into the game, and that a lot of these players have a lot of credit in the bank and will get another opportunity next week, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the changes would probably be on the bench more so. I just don't think you can go into another game next week with that kind of bench, particularly having delivered, like I said, 0 impact. So I'd like to see guys like Ryan Baird, guys like Craig Casey come back in. Obviously, tight head's going to be a bit of an issue now because Tom O'Toole, we haven't mentioned, went off 2 minutes after coming on. So Tyg Furlong, there's no clarity yet if he's going to be fit. If he's not, Tom Clarkson, the Leinster tight head, is in training with Ireland as a training panelist at the moment. And look, maybe that's the kick in the arse that the Ireland coach staff are going to need to trust some of these more the props. If only they could have a couple of more loose heads breaking through. I know Jack Boyle is there as well, but whether we'll see him this month or not. So
not really to lose at this stage of the cycle of this. These are the games, as you said earlier. These are the games. If
not now, when?
If you're pushing Tyg Furlong back for a November game and a Friday night against Argentina, and risk play, and I don't think they will take risks, so they know how important he is. God, trust him. Yeah. Trust Thomas Clarkson. See what he's like. See if he's able to do it. Because at the end of the day, you lose a few more ranking points. I think, if Furlong's fit, he plays. He's, maybe you put Clarkson on the bench because we know everything that Finlay Bealham can do. But I do think this team looks like it needs a bit of renewal. I don't want to write Peter O'Mahony off or Cian Healy, Healy's we'll get to the Caps record that they're going to make that happen, and that's deserved. It's a nice way to build possibly the Fiji game or next week even, but I do think we just need to see fresh legs, dynamic players being brought into this team just for the energy that they have, because their defensive energy was good tonight, but their attacking, they just looked like it. I don't want to write them off completely, but there's a bit of a trend that this team is on fumes a little bit and needs renewal.
Okay, well, we will see what happens there. That is it from us. There'll be more rugby chat on the Indo Sport podcast with Joe Malloy next week, and of course on the left wing. But for now, thanks for listening.